Hello there.
The cinema courtroom is now in session.
Ladies and gentlemen of the esteemed jury, welcome to the Cinema Courtroom Show, a podcast where your favorite blockbusters await trial with your very own host and galactic judge, Mark, your one and only. Do not forget to like and subscribe on whatever streaming platform that you happen to tune into, whether it be Spotify or the Cinema Courtroom YouTube page, because every click on the icon counts. So, furthermore, do not forget to ring the notification bell and reshare this podcast with your friends, family, cat, dog, pigeon, whomever. Now, without further ado, let us begin with our review topic, The Martian, starring Matt Damon. We've seen stories where the protagonist is stranded on a deserted island, Antarctica, the Sahara Desert, even a stalled elevator. But how often do we get a realistic story where a protagonist happens to be stranded on Mars? Not very much. Luckily enough, The Martian serves as an exception to that trope. And now it stands trial for this episode 10 installment of the Cinema Courtroom. That's right, episode 10, and we're just getting started. We're not done. It is now up to me, your galactic judge, to determine the verdict for The Martian, based on the following criteria which I apply in most of my reviews. Most of which: cinematography, acting in characters. Is Matt Damon exceptional at playing the character, Mark? And does Matt Damon give us a convincing performance as if Matt Damon is actually stranded on the planet Mars? And also, the caliber for the plot in general. Is the plot for The Martian being delivered with the quality which exceeds the bare minimum? Here's what I think. The Martian is like a documentary on the science behind being left on Mars. It's still a sci-fi movie in its full rights, don't get me wrong, but it has somewhat of a pragmatic take on the sci-fi genre. Also, when it comes to the cinematography, The Martian utilizes actual NASA technology, which is pretty awesome, to visualize the landscape of Mars in the movie. And sure, most of it is CGI, but the audience can get a fix on by watching this movie that a lot of effort has been made, to contribute to the immersion of viewers into a planet that doesn't just seem like Earth. The Martian had a demanding job of making Mars accurate, not just with a green screen. I'm not saying they have actually taken their film crew and filmed on Mars, but it's close. If we didn't know any better about Mars travel being an impossibility, would we as the audience be convinced that Mark Watney is being stranded there? Furthermore, I think that the cinematography of this movie answers such questions really well. Although we are aware of what is happening in this movie is fictitious, yet it still retains a sense of realism. Okay, so now that I touched on the cinematography of The Martian with NASA and all that, how about the acting and characters? I think Matt Damon delivers his best performance in this movie. He plays the stranded astronaut, presumed dead on another planet, almost impeccably. Perhaps we could have done with a few more minutes of background context for the Mark character. Who was his mother? Who was his father? Did he have any siblings? Stuff like that. But other than that, Matt Damon performs a good amount of comedic moments exceptionally well. And it makes sense for there to be comedy incorporated into a movie like The Martian, because being abandoned to possibly die on Mars is indeed a grim prospect, and there has to be a means to psychologically cope with that prospect through humor. The funniest scene in The Martian is when NASA finally establishes a communication channel with Mark, and then Mark begins swearing left and right after he's found out the revelation in which that his crew left him behind. And then one of the NASA employees is like, "Sir, please, this is being publicly broadcasted." Hilarious scene. I want to talk about the level of quality for the plot of The Martian. That's not only the humor, which I just outlined. And you know what? I'm just going to say that the quality meter for this movie has increased, like up to the sky. Well, maybe a very tall building. But The Martian pushes the message of humanity's will to survive against resolute odds, and the camaraderie between the other astronauts navigating to and from Mars. They could have left Mark behind on Mars for good, but instead they steered the ship around and were willing to face the wrath of the consequences associated with being space pirates and breaching NASA's orders, which is a big deal. You're in space, you're not supposed to mess around. Those are the strict instructions. Follow them or be punished. It is also like movies like The Martian that makes me really pissed off when idiots online in real life make the assertion, "We don't need space expositions. We need to deal with the social and economic poppycock on Earth and obliterate poverty." Well, listen here, buddy. A movie like The Martian can be used as a compass to solving complex problems and suggesting one or two plausible solutions to the most backbreaking of problems plaguing our species. It even elevates the minor significance that we as sapiens have in the vast and infinite universe, possibly multiverse, who knows? Because the more technology evolves, the more it is thinkable to survive on a planet like Mars. This speaks volumes to how the plot of The Martian is being delivered with quality, since it has the rare ability to actually inspire the progression of mankind. And that's a very rare feat. Not to say that The Martian isn't fiction. It most definitely is, don't get me wrong. But it still has a scientifically driven plot in its possession, with a good display of character resilience. And in a culture where apparently some people don't really believe in science, it's really a consolation to have The Martian being released. Mark could have taken off his helmet at any moment on his time on Mars. And I mean, who would blame him? But he didn't. He held on, and I think that is something that the audience can take away from this movie. Other sci-fi exploration films could do well in following the example of the filmmaking of The Martian because of how accurate and authentic that the cinematography is, how wonderful the acting is, and how well performed the characters are, and the high caliber of the plot, despite there being a deficiency of early groundwork and development for the main protagonist at times. But, that might have been to the movie's benefit. Given all of these factors, the screenplay of The Martian is indeed a reflection of adequate filmmaking. And now we begin to approach the post-sentencing hearing. What is the post-sentencing hearing, you may ask? Well, I'm glad you inquired. In the first half of the Cinema Courtroom podcast, we take time to review one of the films that I've selected, old and new, big and small, underrated and overrated, the broken and the damned, black, white, brown, orange, and blue. Then, in the second half of the Cinema Courtroom show, I assemble all of the leftover topics that pertain to the film industry overall and integrate it into one post-sentencing hearing list, not necessarily just limited to movies, also movie subjects around the globe. Think of it as an after party that is long overdue, where you are invited, or in judiciary terms, an invitation to a retrial in order to rectify an unfair hearing. Because sometimes, like the organic sapient that I am, I find that I've been too critically generous or harsh about a movie, so the majority of the time, I change my opinions after a rewatch or two, which means I am compelled to review it again in a post-sentencing hearing. If you listen this far into the podcast, then I salute you for sticking around to the second half of the Cinema Courtroom show. If you enjoy what you're hearing and what I have to say, if you haven't done so already while being tuned in, I would strongly recommend that you give this podcast a reshare and like this episode by clicking the thumbs up or heart icon on whatever platform that you're tuning in on, Spotify or the Cinema Courtroom YouTube channel. This way, you will be supporting the Cinema Courtroom as well as its future episodes, installments, and assets. That being said, I salute you once again for your generous engagement and support, and I hope you continue to join us in the ride to success. In this hearing, we are going to cover the following: Michael Keaton breaking his silence on the cancellation of Warner Bros. Batgirl, the possibility of Justice League 2, Kit Harrington on Black Knight's return to the MCU, and finally, Captain America 4's filming date. I'll also throw in a few extra nuggets on the controversial Sabra character. Enjoy.
Don't kill me! Don't kill me, man! Don't kill me! Don't kill me, man!
I'm not going to kill you. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to tell all your friends about me.
What are you?
I'm Batman.
Boy, oh boy. Just when you think that you've heard it all about Batgirl. Just when you heard it all. Something related to the cancellation of the Batgirl project just springs out of thin air. It turns out, according to Variety, that Michael Keaton, the Batman veteran himself, I'm Batman, has actually broken his silence on Batgirl. Let us read exactly what he had said regarding Batgirl and discuss it further, shall we? I think it was a business decision. I'm going to assume it was a good one, he added. Let me see if I can read it in a Batman voice. I really don't know. That's not Batman. Forget I even attempted to do this. And that's all Michael Keaton said. Okay, now we can see here that Mr. Keaton has maintained a high level of professionalism in that interview because he's been in the game long enough, since 1983. There's nothing more to it. By now, Michael Keaton is aware of the ins and outs of the movie industry and is comprehensive of the nuance behind corporate decision making by Warner Bros. With that in mind, he could just be framing that response in a way that his own personal opinion on the decision to shelve Batgirl doesn't cloud his judgment, which is an admirable thing. I think that Michael Keaton breaking his silence on Batgirl doesn't change what I believe to be the terrible decision making of Warner Bros. I mentioned in a segment of an earlier podcast that their poor quality had resulted in a bunch of people getting screwed over. Warner Bros. Neglected their commitment to release Batgirl and decided to help themselves to the liberty to just treat it as something that is just made for fun and allowing a director's set piece to go unnoticed. I honestly think that Michael Keaton's comments on the situation neither solidifies or debunks that view. After all, Michael Keaton said himself that it was an assumption in good faith, and it's a good thing to assume that your employer has a business interest at heart, as long as they cut you the check. Keaton's remarks may also come off as, quote, quote, uninteresting, because I know major entertainment news outlets crave drama and would love for Michael Keaton to say, screw Batman, how can they do this? I'm gonna suit up as Batman and kick their ass. But no, I think that Screen Rant, which is where I get the majority of my entertainment coverage from, makes a rather agreeable point on why Michael Keaton narrowed down his opinions of a situation to a brief comment. The man's really busy and is involved in countless other projects, which means that for now, the only strong reactions that we are ever going to get in regards to the cancellation of Batgirl is from us movie pundits, a couple of directors, and a few vocal actors. Michael Keaton is, of course, not one of those people. What do you guys think about Michael Keaton weighing in, with a limited insight, mind you, about Batgirl? Do you share the same mindset as him? Are you just going to assume that Warner Brothers is making a good and sound business decision? Do you think that's a wrong assumption to even have to begin with? Is there more to the story than we know? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, or if you're listening to this on an audio feed, find me on the YouTube comment section on the Cinema Courtroom, or even better yet, shoot a message to our Twitter inbox at Cinema Courtroom. The Justice League has been a face of countless discourse when it comes to the DCEU. After all, Justice League served as the first big crossover event, consisting of iconic characters that we all know and hopefully love. Superman, Wonder Woman, The Flash, Cyborg, and of course, Batman. I didn't mention Green Lantern because he hasn't joined the live-action Justice League lineup yet. Let's face it, the theatrical version of Justice League, what I like to call the inferior dumpster fire version, well, that's kind of sounds similar to Virgin, because it's low performing in the box office. I'm going to just put it that way. And the theatrical version of Justice League was also not received well with critics at all. The production behind that movie was an absolute mess, and it has resulted in negative reception and low DVD sales for the theatrical version of Justice League. The prospect of a Justice League 2 being in development is definitely a surprising thing, especially when it turns out that Zack Snyder is done with the DCEU. Finish. And his version, the original Snyder Cut, was probably, and I'm saying this based on the engagement on the movie, DC's biggest hit since The Dark Knight. It won something in the Oscars, and for the life of me, I can't seem to remember. Oh yes, the iconic scene with the Flash bypassing the Speed Force won Best Cheer Moment. And no, the votes in that category were legitimate. The Academy confirmed on May 13th this year that no tampering and bot accounts were involved in the voting process. I digress to say that Justice League 2 might not only be in early development, but it turns out that a director has already been considered for the project. Adam Muschietti, the director of the unreleased Flash film, which is a PR mess at the moment. I might want to talk about that in a future segment, should this escalate into another delay. According to multiple reports of test screenings for The Flash has been well received by the test audience, and if we don't have to take those reports with a massive grain of salt, which we should, perhaps the future of Justice League might be in capable hands, and under the management of a director who is just as competent as Zack Snyder, in which he'll hopefully prove that in the Flash movie. While fans are, and rightfully so, upset at the prospect of Justice League 2 being in development without Mr. Zack Snyder, I am sad too. Perhaps we should maybe put that aside, you fight off the inevitable, and just give another director a chance at having a crack at the DCEU crossover team. The question now is, what do you think about Justice League 2 being in early development? I want to throw in another question. Do you think we're going to explore the apocalyptic saga that Zack Snyder tried to set up in Batman vs. Superman: Dawn of Justice and the epilogue of his Justice League version? Might we even get a rogue Superman like Homelander from The Boys? Whatever you think about this topic, let me know in the comment section below or our Twitter box your thoughts.
I'm sorry. I have to try. Sure you're ready for that, Mr. Whitman?
You know nothing, Jon Snow. Anyone get that reference? I'm here to cover yet again another piece of news. This time in regards to Kit Harington's Black Knight, hinted in the Eternals post-credit scene, and whether or not he is going to make a return to the MCU. According to Kit Harington himself, he is optimistic, but, however, he is still not aware of the decision making regarding the Black Knight. And I quote, I again, and this is true, I don't know much of what they're planning. And I hope to be involved in future stuff of that character with Dane Whitman. And that he might go on and be the thing that everyone quotes at me in the street. As if Jon Snow isn't the subject of that. But continuing on, I honestly don't know. I don't know what their plans are. I know we're going into a kind of Phase 5. Alright, so here is how I think that the Black Knight is going to appear again in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I think that the Black Knight is going to show in Blade, which is filming after 2 weeks. In the last credit scene of Eternals, the Black Knight is last spotted with a sword, and then we hear Blade's voice. The likelihood is that the Blade movie will follow up on that very scene. There is something that I think we should remember about Marvel Studios when it comes down to contractual obligations and whatnot. Unlike before, in fact, this is relatively recent, Marvel has stopped giving actors multi-billionaire contracts, like they've formerly done with Brie Larson, Samuel L. Jackson, and so on. Instead, the actors in the MCU are contracted for whatever movies that they are supposed to appear in, and it is up to them and the other party to negotiate another contract. That might be the case for the Black Knight character and the uncertainty surrounding it. This might be the case as well of having to cut Kit Harington another check or extend his existing contract for whatever the MCU is planning in the long run. Perhaps, and this is just speculation, there might be a Black Knight movie or trilogy. Eternals might have been his first official debut. At the same time, I get why Black Adam might only be in a few movies as opposed to Samuel L. Jackson as Nick Fury, or as we've been noticing lately, Benedict Wong as Wong in numerous Phase 4 projects. Kit Harington is going to return for a sequel to one of the most popular television series, Game of Thrones, for a separate Jon Snow sequel. That might include other stuff that we haven't heard about, and it's also like a clear indication that Kit Harington will have a fully booked schedule, and since the MCU distributes 3 movies per year, it might be too much of a fast pace for Kit Harington to accommodate when he has another massive show coming out dedicated to him. If you were Kit Harington, wouldn't you go where the biggest payday is? Like, would you rather reprise the role of a popular character in the popular TV series, Jon Snow, get paid significantly more, probably, because, my guess is since the show is all about you, or, would you rather return as Black Knight in the MCU in a Blade movie, or whatever? But maybe your pay might be less, since you could just be a side character, unless you get your own Black Knight movie. Furthermore, I think that in order to guarantee Kit Harington's re-emergence as a Black Knight, it is absolutely essential to grant him a competitive pay grade so that he can ditch the new Game of Thrones sequel for a little while longer and make bigger bank over at Marvel. What would you guys do if you're Kit Harington contemplating reprising your role as the Black Knight? Would you rather adjust your focus on being in other projects, whether it be television shows or movies, which we would definitely talk about on the Cinema Courtroom? Would you invest your time, energy, and talent for the biggest comic book series? Whatever your decision as Kit Harington may be, I would be very interested to hear your insights. Captain America for New World Order's filming date has been confirmed. I've noticed that this has been the hot topic when it came to Marvel. YN Pally American tweeted, "The new Marvel superhero is an Israeli Mossad agent named Sabra. New line. Can someone explain to me why we keep using the name Sabra?" The first thing pretty much every Palestinian remembers when we hear Sabra is the massacre of Sabra Shatila. It feels deliberate. By the way, my pronunciation of the name might, come and go, when it comes to mentioning Sabra. And that, I can't help it. So, that's just for you to know. So, we can tell straight off the bat that people have started to recognize the implication of calling a new Marvel superhero Sabra. And I mean, everything this user has tweeted out is factual. It is named after a real massacre that had occurred. There is a lot of history that I strongly recommend that you look up by a quick Google search, and even Wikipedia, where most of the contributions are verified, mostly. Just read multiple perspectives of the Sabra incident as well. Be informed. Know the basic ins and outs of why people online are in opposition to the introduction of Sabra in the MCU. I want to delve into 2 more tweets before I go into the filming update for Captain America 4. A Twitter user who goes by the username Mock makes an interesting argument that I think we ought to hear. Sabra is an anti-IDF superhero. In the comics, she used to be IDF until Hulk criticizes her stance, and she had a change of heart and switched sides. Her whole origin is anti-colonialism and anti-Zionism. Here is what is interesting about this online discourse. We have one user who doesn't want to see Sabra appear in the MCU altogether because of their implications, and we have another user who I assume holds an anti-Zionism stance that, thinks that Sabra can be utilized as a tool against the IDF and Zionist ideologies. That's really interesting because I looked up a page of the comics where the Hulk straight up calls her out so that Sabra can see a Palestinian boy as a human being. What if we get a scene like that in Captain America New World Order? It wouldn't really make sense because the Hulk is off doing his own thing, And would it be a bad thing to have Sabra in the MCU if she is a character whose sole fundamental purpose is to criticize the IDF? Take Schindler's List, for instance. Just because the main protagonist, Oskar Schindler, is a Nazi and was implicit in the killing of thousands of Jews didn't make him the villain in the end, because the whole premise of his character arc was to consolidate as many Jews as he could from concentration camps. He utilized his privilege to elevate other minority groups and earn a redemption arc. Could it be that perhaps the MCU might go a similar approach with Sabra? I don't think the MCU should introduce her at all, because they would then be dealing with a sensitive political subject matter, and 9 out of 10 times I despise it when a fictional movie tries to incorporate political ideologies and agendas in their screenplays. But if, in the off chance that Sabra might be portrayed in a way that is elevating to the Palestinian minorities, what would be the harm in having her in Captain America? Now again, you should hear this tweet from an unnamed user about how it is embarrassingly tone deaf for Marvel to introduce a Jewish and Israeli superhero in a film called New World Order. That's a fair point. One might easily assume that they're building a Zionist order, which involves the eradication of Arabs. There's no way around that, okay? So, to establish a Jewish political state. So, considering that the movie is called Captain America, it could perhaps resolve around United States allies. Israel and the Israeli military is, one of those allies. I don't know. I myself am not optimistic about this casting news, and I just don't know. I don't want to talk about it anymore. But let's just move on to the filming update of Captain America 4. According to Screen Rant, it turns out that Captain America New World Order will begin filming in early 2023, probably around January or February. Around that time, we are probably going to be receiving leaks, probably a clip of Sabra killing a villain, that one child across the street. Too soon? Yeah, that must have been too soon. But anyway, now that you got to hear me break down the controversy and backlash surrounding the inclusion of the Israeli Marvel superhero Sabra, what do you guys think of this news when it comes to the MCU's reputation as a movie series overall? Do you think that they might be onto something? What do you think about the filming update for Captain America 4? Are you looking forward to Captain America 4 New Order? Whatever insights that you might have, let me know in the comment section or on our Twitter inbox. Once again, at the Cinema Courtroom. I would love to know your thoughts regarding Captain America New Order. We have now reached the end of this podcast. Thank you for tuning in to the Cinema Courtroom Show, where we critiqued movies. I had a lot of fun doing this podcast, so make sure to subscribe if you enjoyed episode 10 of the Cinema Courtroom. It feels good to just say the number 10. In light of this mini milestone, I will be introducing a brand new segment into this show, and it's going to be completely engrossed in box office figures and other news related to the global box office as well, weekly. In every episode of the Cinema Courtroom Show, on Tuesday and Friday, after I announce the topics for the post-sentencing hearing, I will be doing an 8 to 10 minute segment of box office related news. This new segment is going to be called Jack in the Box Office. The nice thing about Jack in the Box Office is that it will be accessible to viewers with a short hearing span. Every Sunday, I'll upload the short Jack in the Box Office segment separately on the Cinema Courtroom YouTube channel. As of when that segment will launch on the Cinema Courtroom channel, it might be in 2 weeks' time, maybe. I don't have a specific time frame, but it's coming soon. That's all I will confirm. With that down, I hope to see you guys again. In the next episode, we're going to talk about, yet again, another movie. As for what movie it's going to be, find out when the next episode of the Cinema Courtroom Show launches this coming Friday on the YouTube and Spotify platform. We finally made it to the Big 10, guys. And there are many more to come. Thank you once again for listening to the end. I'm your Galactic Judge, Mark, and I hope you have a spectacular, spectacular day.
Hello there.
Court is now dismissed.